Great. So I would say let's get started because we have a very packed agenda with a lot of great content from our speakers. So welcome everyone to the Data Europa Academy webinar series, Data Spaces. As you know, this is a continuation of the webinars we were organizing on data spaces. We touch upon the European Green Deal data space, the health data space, the cultural heritage data space, and today we want to know more about the common European mobility data space. And here I'm very well surrounded by experts in the field who will introduce you to this topic and give us a bit more information about the state of play. As we know, the common European data spaces are created to ensure fair, transparent, proportionate access to data while ensuring a trustworthy and secure environment for businesses and citizens. With European Mobility Data Space, we want to create a space of data pooling and data sharing, facilitating exchange of data across the mobility sector. So today, before I introduce the speakers, I would like to bring to you the typical rules of the game. So first of all, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on the course on data spaces together with the other lessons and webinars of the other data spaces. For questions, you know that we have 15 minutes Q&A at the end of this session. So you will be able to place your question, and as moderator, I will bring them to the speakers at the end of the session. And please, your feedback is very important for us. So please reserve 3 minutes after this webinar to fill in the feedback form because we really take your opinion and your feedback into account. So, well, I was mentioning I'm very well surrounded today. We have four wonderful speakers to accompany me today. So, I will very briefly introduce them. So, first of all, as you may know me, I'm Ima Farfan Velasco. I'm project manager working on the Data Europa Academy and coordinating the learning offer that the Academy has. And I'm here with Dimitrios Katsoflias. So he's policy officer at the European Commission, Directorate General on Mobility and Transport, with more than 15 years experience in the transport sector in the public and private sector. We have also Marina Aguado. She's project officer in the Data and Semantic Interoperability Unit in the European Union Agency for Railways. She holds a PhD on telecommunication engineering, and she has more than 10 years experience in the railway research. Then we have also Stephanie Fedel. She's a strategic project manager at Acatech, so the National Academy of Science and Engineering. She contributes to the project of deployEMDS, so the mobility data space, co-funded by the Digital Europe program. So this project wants to ensure interoperable, accessible data sharing to reuse efficient multimodal mobility and traffic management. But later we will hear more about this project and this wonderful use case. And then last but not least, we have Stephen Locke. He's managing director at Movias, a smart mobility consultancy. And today he represents the Flanders regions as a partner of the deploy EMDS project. But he will tell us more about it later on. So this is how our agenda will look like. So first, Dimitrios will explain more about the general European mobility data space and state of play benefits and challenges, and also the roadmap about what's coming up. Then we will zoom in into the railway sector and railway agency ontologies that will be presented by Marina Aguado. And then we'll hear from these both use cases from Stephanie and Stephen. So I would like to thank you all for your time, and I will give the floor now to Dimitrios, who introduces the Common European Mobility Data Space. Dimitrios, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Inma. I hope that you can all hear me. And thank you very much for helping us to organize this session. And of course, everyone that has taken the time in the middle of summer to join this session on EMDS, on the Common European Mobility Data Space. I see more than 200 people and the number increasing. That's very exciting. And I will jump directly to the main topic of digitalization of mobility and transport. As you all know, digital technologies and networks are key enablers enablers for an efficient, affordable, sustainable, and of course safe mobility and transport. When I use the term mobility, I refer mainly to the passenger mobility, and with transport more to the freight and logistics part. As you see here, it's just an indicative list of legislative initiatives that we have worked on, or we still work on, not only from DigiMove side, but also from the European Commission for the different modes of transport, but also some that are relevant on multimodal mobility, and of course also logistics. I'm not going to go into this. I'm not even an expert on each of these, but what I wanted to say is that there's a common denominator in all of these initiatives, and this is data. And data, either defining, let's say, what kind of data or what kind of protocols, how that exchange should take place, data sharing, and so on. And we have noticed that this brings a little bit of challenges of mobility and transport data sharing, because there are many players that they are reluctant to share data, either due to security concerns, competition, lack of trust. Also, as you notice, this kind of non-exhaustive list, it's pretty heterogeneous and diverse because of the different stakeholders, the transport modes, and the data types, and this leads to fragmentation. So we understood that there is a need for a kind of umbrella initiative and more of a holistic approach to all these different sectors. So although we have the legislation that tackles the problem for each specific of the subsectors or modes, let's say, transport modes, still we need to see if there are still discrepancies or a need for harmonization between the different transport modes. This led us to, let's say, defining or proposing, following the data strategy and the sustainable smart mobility strategy, to propose a common European mobility data space that would help to facilitate, access, pooling, and sharing of data, not only from existing, but also to create this kind of framework and infrastructure for to enable this for future transport and mobility data sources. Although I have presented, let's say, in the last year multiple times, let's say, the objectives, I think it's very important to always look at those to ensure that why we're trying to what we're trying to achieve with the EMDS. First of all, we want to identify the crucial data for mobility and transport across Europe and increase their availability. The second objective will be to help users, and when we say users, it could be either service providers or local authorities, national authorities, anyone that will be interested to discover these data sources, and of course to facilitate the data access and reuse. It doesn't mean that all data, all mobility and transport data will be available for free, but we need to provide transparency. We need to explain who are the data holders, what are the access conditions. So what would someone need, even someone that is not maybe an expert in a very specialized field, how can they get access to specific data on which terms? The fourth one is to enable technical, organizational, and legal interoperability between both public and private actors. We have launched also some initiatives to look into this aspect. Also, to optimize the data collection and reduce administrative burden, mainly through recommendations for this part. The last one, it has to do with interoperability between other common European data spaces. And what I mean with that is, I can show you in the next slide, there are other relevant common European data spaces. Inma also mentioned some at the beginning that they have already presented in the Data Europe Academy. Those that we consider relevant to interlink, let's say, with the EMDS is the Green Deal, Smart and Sustainable Cities and Communities data space that is part of Green Deal actually, the energy when it comes to use cases to EV charging, for example, industrial or manufacturing data space, tourism, of course, which mobility is an important part of, and all these on top of two initiatives that are also um, launched by the Commission. One is on the Data Space Support Center, and they can help not only the Commission but also any actor in Europe that would like to get on board and launch their own data space. So they can, you can consult them of how to do that, and they issue um, blueprint and glossary and building blocks to guide you on that. And another recently launched initiative, Symbol, that is more about an open source cloud to edge middleware platform. So more of a software, let's say, tools that will help the implementation of the data spaces. Regarding our milestones, one of the first milestones that we achieved last year was the adoption of a communication on the EMDS, where we proposed the way forward, and we included there the objectives, the main components, supporting measures and milestones. So I'm really welcoming you to go to the document. It's not a very long one. It's around 20 pages where we outline all this, and we are welcome exchange on information about this communication. Here is just an indicative list of use cases. In the communication, we have listed many more, of course, and we have outlined them in much more detail. But here, as a high level, let's say, overview, the aim is to increase the efficiency of the logistics sectors as we will be taking into account many more of modes of transports to calculate, for example, estimated time of arrivals, rest times, taking into account truck parking on highways, safe truck parking on highways, and so on. This will help service providers to improve their services. The implementation of UVARs, the urban vehicle access regulations, is a very interesting use case. As, for example, to create a low emission zone for a city, you would need administrative data, probably environmental data, geographical. It needs to be all this digitized, of course, exchanged with a service provider. That, for example, when you're driving with your vehicle and you're using your preferred application, either in vehicle info system or on your smartphone, any kind of app that you are using to on your GPS to move around, then ideally you would need to know that you're about to enter that zone, that if your vehicle is allowed to enter, based on, for example, if it's electric or not, and what are the rules, but more importantly, how to be able to receive, let's say, an ad hoc exception if you transport people with reduced mobility, for example. The next one is about boosting cross-border passenger and freight multimodality, and the last one to facilitate access on electromobility data. I know this is a bit of a complicated or dense slide, but I'm trying to break it down for you. What is the EMDS framework that we're proposing? On the left, in the blue box, you see pretty much what I had on my first slide, all the EU mobility data domains and initiatives. And also, when I say initiatives, it's not only legislative, it could be also like the logistics forum, the DTLF, the expert group, or the ITS, the Intelligent Transport System national access points. And we have NAPCOR also working into the harmonization of the national access points. So we have all these EU mobility initiatives. We have in Europe also public and private mobility data ecosystems and initiatives like the German mobility data space, EONAX, which is a private public data space, and the other sectoral data spaces that I mentioned before. And at the same time, we want to offer to EMDS participants, those that you see on the right, data providers, users, marketplaces, and service providers, to discover all this data that are into the ecosystems on the left, to be able to understand how they can get access. Then they can use this data to create innovative services. For the actual framework, it will be consisted, of course, of building blocks. We don't need to start from scratch. There are already a lot of building blocks are relevant to data sharing, to security, trust, to on data spaces. And as I said, data space support center is also helping into that. We have a lot of standards, so it's not in our scope to create and develop new standards necessarily, but to create, to use and recommend those that are already available, and help also to harmonize, to help to convert to specific use of standards. And then the linking layer that you see at the top is a kind of component that we want to use that will facilitate into the discovery and the interlinking of the various data sets or from the data sources that you see around. We have launched a study that I will talk a little bit later to look exactly how this interlinking layer should be consisted of, what should be the architecture, if it should be a portal with user interface, how the connectors will work, and so on. The actions that we have launched already, some are concluded. For example, the preparatory action, the prep space for mobility, and I have some slides dedicated to that, where we mapped the consortium mapped existing mobility data ecosystems and did the first recommendation on common building blocks. This was concluded in September last year. Following that, we have the kickoff of a deployment action, deployEMDS, where we will have also Stephanie and Stephen talking specifically on that later with an actual use case. We have 9 cities/regions working on use cases related to traffic and urban mobility, and this will run for 3 years. As I mentioned, we launched a technical assistance study this January. It will be completed in December, where we will focus on the governance of the EMDS, the overall governance, the interlinking layer that I presented in the framework, the slide before, and further definition of building blocks and looking into interoperability. Following that, we would like to continue with the deployment action of the interlinking layer. A recent initiative that was concluded was a 6-month proof of concept with the SEMIC team of DigiDigit, where we looked at how personal data are managed in the EMDS framework through a multimodal use case. If you're working for local authorities or transport operators in a local or regional environment, we will welcome you to contact us to look into how, and if you want to know how, or if you want to explore how to manage personal data in your systems, I think it will be a good exchange to have on. The outcome of this proof of concept was an SDK, so it was actually a software tool available on GitHub. The last one is the multi-country projects. We have here, it's still in evaluation phase, but and it's already closed, so we are now evaluating the proposals. And the idea here is to support the establishment of lasting collaboration structures and focus on cross-border use cases. I mentioned about the prep space for mobility. This action looked at more than 400 initiatives, ecosystems, and platforms. Of course, we need to do a filtering to look into those that are mapped to specific needs. Also, when it comes to maturity, when it comes to multimodality, or the modes that we were interested for this study. So the team in the end looked at 272 data ecosystems that match the relevance criteria. I have here the QR code where you can scan. You can have a look at the inventory, and this is also the website where you can review the deliverable. The deliverable that provided recommendations on building blocks based on the data space, support center, building block taxonomy. Here you see on the top the organizational and business building blocks when it comes to business and funding models, governance, and legal aspects. And then on the bottom, the technical and grounding reference architectures like data interoperability, data sovereignty and trust, and value creation building blocks. For the EMDS technical study, as I mentioned, it started in January. The 3 tasks that the consortium is looking at is first the analysis of the technical and governance dimension of the EMDS framework. The second one, it will do an analysis with specifications and recommendations for the creation of the interlinking layer. And the third one is specifications and recommendations for potential participants to interlink and exchange data through the EMDS framework. So with what we mean with task 2 is what we need to do from the Commission side in order to create the interlinking layer. Task 3 is what potential participants would need to provide from their side when it comes to metadata, for example, minimum set of metadata in order to be able to interlink and exchange data through the framework. We had already quite many workshops. There's one upcoming also on September 10th. That will be the last one where we will validate the draft recommendations. And then there will be a final report by the end of the year. One of the last, I think also, yes, I think it's one of my last slides, at least initiatives, is a relatively also new initiative launched by DigiConnect, relevant to the Digital Decade Policy Program of 2030. These are the European Digital Infrastructure Consortia. It's a new mechanism to implement multi-country projects. There are already some edicts that have been announced this year relevant to artificial intelligence, and there is an ongoing preparation for a possible mobility and logistics data edict that would allow coordination and alignment on common standards among its members, and of course to support the implementation of cross-border use cases. Currently, the member states, so this is a member states driven initiative. This is important to mention that we need at least 3 member states to make an application to the Commission to create an edict. Private actors are also allowed, of course, to join and encouraged actually to join. And after the application, there will be an European Commission decision to create this entity. There will be a seat of this entity, and they could actually, as an entity, apply to potential grants for funding in the future and participate in relevant initiatives. Currently, we have Netherlands as a suggested also host, Germany, Finland, Spain, Austria, Slovakia, and Italy working on the application, along with France and Luxembourg as observers. We are closely following on that, and other member states, regions, and organizations have shown interest. We hope that we have an application by the end of the year from these member states. Regarding next steps, as I mentioned, we do the evaluation of the Digital Euro program for 2024. We continue with reviewing material for the application for the mobility and logistics data edict, the technical assistance study and deploy EMDS actions, and we need to start working later this year, beginning of next year, to define the terms of reference for the deployment action of the interlinking layer. I think that's from my side, and I hope I managed to be on time. And I think we can already, yes, I think I will ask Marina to come on stage.
Thank you, Dimitrios. And now I will start zooming in into the railway sector and specifically explaining the ERA ontology and how it's linked to the common European mobility data space. So first of all, here it is, the slide. Okay. I would like to provide an overview of the data ecosystem challenge in the railway context and why this challenge. At the end, the railway system is conformed by a multitude of elements that are capable of generating data through the railway network, and at the end is an enormous quantity of railway data assets in motion, and some of them are supporting also critical safety use cases. So, and I would like also to add that the real-time traceability of those assets is crucial to have a performant operation. And let's gonna focus a bit more on the ecosystem, and I would say that there are multiple actors that, for example, they have a common interest, in this case a signal, but depending on the type of role that the information, the variables, the properties of that signal are different. So, but the definition of common identifier should be unique, so you can trace and answer federated information about this signal. For example, a signal for a maintenance team has different properties than those ones that are needed for railway infrastructure deployment, or operation. At the end, we are in a scenario that there are multiple use cases sharing the same data assets with different or heterogeneous data models, with a lack of common definitions, lack of common identifiers, and this set up a scene of low reusability and a huge economic effort on end-to-end data interfaces. And that's why we are now in the context of solving this through the European mobility data space. I would like also now to put the ontology or the railway ontology in context in today's presentation of mobility data spaces. having a global overview of what is a common European data spaces that embraces different sectorial data spaces. For example, the Common European Mobility Data Space. Under this framework, we have public and private initiatives, and within those public initiatives, there is the entire part of railway and transport regulation, which defines both business to governance data exchange and data stores, and also business to business, how a railway operator needs to exchange data with an IM, infrastructure manager, or how any actor, any operator needs to share safety information about any safety occurrence with the different actors in the railway domain. So there are plenty of regulation there, and what we are doing is that host or that defines multiple data stores and data exchanges. And what we are doing is trying to, well, we have built a common European railway agency or rail ontology that hosts all those definitions that come from the law, and we are using it to harmonize also the different glossary elements and machine readable definitions. So initially we start with linking the railway vehicle type data store together with the European railway infrastructure. And today we have a standard because we are using standards to build semantic standards to build this ontology that is legally binding because we put the way to exchange data in with the agency and with other actors has to be using this ontology, and is also being referred in the document that Dimitrios shared with us before in Commission Staff Working Document on Common European Data Spaces. And also we have some is human and machine readable. I'm going to provide some data on this on current situation. We are using a knowledge graph to host information about more than 270,000 track segments that are compulsorily shared by the different infrastructure managers. And we have also more than 2,000 vehicle types that are authorized to run in the European railway network. So plenty of information is able to cross and to check compatibility statistics. So we are currently sharing the data with multiple actors. And this slide shows how we have adopted the FAIR principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable principles, and also with having in mind the once-only principle that any actor should only provide once the information to the SIM, and having also into account that this will bring us economy of scale and better performance. And we have drafted our own strategy to verificate all these data assets at ERA in the agency. And with this, what we are currently is linking data with the other railway or transport in railway transport regulations like INSPIRE, TEN-T, and also providing data to Eurostat. And in the context of business to governance, at the end, plenty of actors are providing and consuming the data. We are acting as kind of a hub, and In the context of business to business, we are harmonizing some use cases that are kind of critical safety related. And last slides are only to say that kind of show that initially there were not many initiatives on semantic activity at the beginning, some years ago, and nowadays we are happy to share with you that there are many actors in the sector semantically lifting their data models to facilitate the common exchange and to building this catalog of glossaries, definitions, and models to facilitate federated queries in the domain. And with this, I conclude my presentation. I think that I was almost on time. Yes. Thank you. I pass the floor now to Stephanie.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. So my name is Stephanie. I'm Strategic Project Manager at Architect, and thank you very much for the invitation today. I'm happy to present today the deployEMDS project, so the deployment action of the development of a common European mobility data space. So as Dimitrios already introduced, we basically started from theory and moved to implementation. So we started with the PrepD Space for Mobility project, which ended in September 2023, where we mapped existing data ecosystem and analyzed and recommended common building blocks for future EMDS. And so that was the basis for our current project, which started in November 2023 and lasts for 3 years. So involved are 45 European partners. So it's a huge consortium of different partners across Europe. And the goal is to build a decentralized technical infrastructure as well as common governance mechanisms. So our objectives are the accessibility, interoperability of data sharing, and that in a secure way. And really the heart of our project are urban mobility use cases in 9 different cities and regions across whole Europe. And we are currently and commonly working on 16 different use cases. So I would like to give you a little overview of our project. This is our project setup. So you really see in the middle of it the different cities. So from Barcelona, Budapest, Flanders, Ile-de-France, Lisbon, Milan, Sofia, Stockholm, and Tampere are our partners within this project. And the work package is led by EMTA, the European Metropolitan Transport Authorities. And then on the other side, we have the work package led by Fraunhofer on the common technical infrastructure. And what we did there in the beginning of the project was an analysis of the technical requirements. As we adopt a bottom-up approach because we really want to understand the needs and the requirements of the cities and regions. And with that, we analyzed that in the very beginning to get an understanding of the data sources, the data products, as well as the governance of it. So is it open versus access control required data? And there is a report on that published now, which you can find on our webpage. And currently, we are in the process of identifying and analyzing existing functional data space building blocks, as well as specific technical components, because we want to rely and work with existing solutions, including connectors, identification and authentication mechanisms and technologies. And therefore, we will also publish a technical specifications report, which is planned to be published in November 2024. And then we have another work package about the governance, the organizational, legal, and market structure led by RISE from Sweden. And there we are currently in the process of having policy labs which address the regulatory and governance challenges in mobility data sharing. As I already said, we adopt a bottom-up approach, so we really want to understand what are the needs also in terms of governance. And in our last policy lab, for example, we covered challenges around how to organize data sharing, trust issues, as well as the reluctance of data sharing. And then we also have work packages on communication, dissemination, and exploitation. And we are, as ARCATAC, located in Munich, Germany, are coordinating and are responsible for project management of the project. To give you a little overview of our use cases and the cities, I will start with a little visual representation to get an impression of our different various cities and regions and use cases. And going into the details a little bit of it, what topics we are covering. So we identified 4 different clusters of our use cases. So as I said, they're all focusing on urban mobility challenges. So for example, we have the topic of public transport operations and, for example, improving bus routing and the fleet management of buses. And then we have a cluster of data for mobility planning, where we, for example, have the development of a forecasting system to optimize the traffic, but also optimizing the reuse of traffic measurement data in Flanders. But about that, we will hear more about in a few minutes. And then we also have topics around multimodality, for example, the development or enhancement of mobility apps, for example, by integrating the data of micromobility providers. And then another topic is specialty travel information, for example, improving the mobility as a right for people with reduced mobility. And also in the scope of our project is to develop 2 different transversal use cases. We have not defined it further yet. However, it is planned to cover also the topic about multimodality, for example, open public transport ticketing or the integration of shared mobility in public transport apps. And another use case, transversal use case, will be about sustainable urban mobility indicators. And as a last slide, I would like to introduce how you could get involved into our project, because, of course, we are very interested to share knowledge, to exchange information. And on the one hand, we have the Innovation and Scaling Group, where we foster the collaboration with external entities, mainly from the private sector, such as industry, SMEs, startups, data innovators. And we would like to develop an innovative use case together, but also promote the knowledge exchange. And on the other hand, if you're from local cities or regions, we also have a network of follower cities where we also want to include external, local, and regional public entities. Also, we want to foster peer learning and to exchange the knowledge, and to also offer trainings to cities outside of our project. For getting more information, you can just use the QR codes which are here on the slide. And we're happy to share and to exchange knowledge with you. And with that, I would like to hand over to one of our partners, to Stephen, who will be introducing the use case from Flanders.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. So I will now go further and explain a kind of a use case we have here in Flanders during the deployEMDS project, where we share data in a data space. And so for that, this is a bottom-up use case, and just to have an illustration of what can be done, I first want to explain for everyone how we explain a data space. Data space is a kind of a decentralized solution when you are working in the data sharing, you probably are here at the left-hand side, that you need to integrate a lot of different data sources. As a publisher, you need to pass data to data consumers, and this is leading to a lot of different, well, APIs, integration costs, and so the interoperability is really hurting that use case. So the right side is our envisioned data space solutions, where we come with one type of a connector, one type of API, that you have one type of standard, so that in that way you can plug and play with data, and that new data adding to your system is just connecting, configuring a new plug. That's the type of solution we are enabling for. And so we are now working to apply that to traffic measurements. Traffic measurements is something which has been done for more than 50 years. It's just counting the amount of vehicles passing on road. It's also about bikes and passengers, walkers. And you have a lot of different technologies on it. And when we ask to the technology providers, do you have a standard? Then they say, yes, we have our own protocol. And that's, of course, a good way that they already have a data protocol. But every supplier, every Technics have his own protocol. So that's really hardening the interoperability over there. Furthermore, Flanders, the northern part of Belgium, we have 6 million inhabitants. We think we already have more than 500 different entities working with traffic measurements. So it's 90% of it is probably public funded data measurements, but it's also on private companies. And so it's a really distributed ownership of the data, but even more, it's also immature. I think that out of the 500, probably 20 have a server. All the rest is probably stored on an individual laptop of someone working with the data. So the data is not open, is not accessible. And when there are so much partners, so much technology working on traffic measurements, it's clear that there is a use case. And the use cases are here, just kind of illustration, a lot of it in mobility, also for having statistics and KPIs, visualizations, controls, digital twins and traffic models, but also outside of the mobility. It's used for retail planning, for permits in spatial environment. It's used in touristic agencies and advertisements even. So a lot of use cases. And what we currently see is that we work with a kind of a closed value chain. If you want to have traffic measurements, you need to buy it yourself, and then you can only use it what you have been paying for. So for example, when I look here to the street near my office, I see that traffic has been measured 4 times last year by the railway company, by the road operator, by the tourist agency, and even by myself as a kind of a civil method to just be informed as a civil servant. Well, what we see is that the data has not been shared until now. And that's really a pity, because it's public money and we are not reusing that data again. So we want to break up this value chain, and that's the idea, to add a data space in between. So everyone who has a sensor, who have installing it, will probably have it already on a data platform. We ask to publish it. And you publish it, then everyone who also have a data platform can plug and play with it, can consume the data, and can use it in his own applications, in his own analysis tools in that way. And so that's the type of a data space. We just break open the linear value chain to add the data space in between. So what do we need to do? And that's already what we are now doing with these entities in Flanders, is, in our view, 4 different steps. First step is we need to define the standardization. Just as with the railway sector, we have been defining the vocabulary. Are we talking, when we're measuring traffic, about a minibus, a light-duty vehicle, or do we call it a van? So we need to have the same vocabulary, the same language to understand the different things we are measuring. Secondly, we need to have a kind of a unique interface, so that indeed you can have a plug-and-play APIs. And so we have built these APIs, and we also have helped in installing it at the large partners who have the much more data on it. Third party is that we really need to also work as an ecosystem. So we need to convince people, we need to have make it able that they reuse it. So we need to really to evangelize, have a kind of evangelization that everyone is joining us in sharing the data, so that you also there is also benefit in it. You can by that also reuse other partners their data. And of course, we also need a kind of a governance, because we want to have it future proof. And there, of course, we want to look to the governance of the EMDS to apply that also to our ecosystem. So currently, we have been able to deploy it in Flanders. We already have different cities, different technical suppliers in that way. And based on that, we currently already have traffic measurements. I think we have more than 10,000 measurement locations already joining our ecosystem, being able in that way to reuse the data. We have kind of the topics in place at the central place. But however, it's a minimum viable data space, meaning that we first really bottom up. We want to launch it as fast as possible, and it's an open data. So we currently do not have the control and the contract policies in place. And then we are looking to join what will be decided in the common mobility, European mobility data spaces, of course. We already have an ecosystem which is working. Procurements are done with our standardization and our building blocks. We also have consumers starting to join us. And now, of course, what we have seen is we want to join really the interlinking layer, because what we have seen is that some of the partners here already have traffic measurements outside the region of Flanders. So by doing that, we will be able to share the data in our ecosystem also with other partners, other regions. So by doing that, we hope we can launch the data spaces even furthermore, and that's a kind of our ambition. So thanks for listening to me. Thanks.
Between the different stakeholders you mentioned. So I would like also to thank all the speakers for the contributions. We had a lot of questions, which is great because it means that we had very engaged audience. So we're going to move now towards the Q&A session. I have to say that if we don't have time to address all these questions, we will send to you all these replies from the speakers afterwards, together, of course, with the slides and the recording. So now that I have all the speakers with me, I would like to address some of the questions. The first one is for Dimitrios, but of course, I would be very happy if Marina, Stephen, or Stephanie, you would like to also give your take. It's about the data that you find this data space and the stakeholders involved. Are only national data portals contributing? Is only a country levels? How do you actually collaborate with transport government departments to deploy these initiatives? So Dimitrios, if you'd like to get started.
Yes, I would like also to make a little bit of summary for everyone to understand how the different presentations are linked together. So as I presented, let's say the umbrella initiative of the EMDS and talking about specific building blocks, we saw the example from Marina, what would be the building block for rail when it comes to the ontologies that ERA is working on. There would be similar building blocks also coming from the other transport modes. And then one of the initiatives, the deployment action that we have launched this year, and we're looking specifically on urban mobility and traffic use cases, where Stephanie presented the whole project, and the very good example of Stephen with Flanders, which is one of the most mature use cases of this activity. Now, the scope and the interest, let's say, for EMDS is for any actor in mobility and transport. Is it if it is local authority, national or regional or a national level, any modes of transport. So any kind of mobility and transport data is relevant. Of course, it will take time to be able to include, let's say, all of this. We started for now with the deployEMDS, looking at the urban mobility and on a, let's say, local and regional level. At the same time, we have the EDIC, as I mentioned, one of the initiatives where member states actually are active there. So we have from the relevant ministries being involved. So this is also how regional and national transport governments can be actively involved. into forming actually the EMDS and helping into all this let's say interoperability effort that we're doing.
Great. So,
And
Marina, yes, sorry,
Just
Dimitrios.
to add that we have also this action for call for those that are interested, especially in local regional environment, that Stephanie presented the slide. And if you want, you can also put it maybe back with the two QR codes where there are these two groups. If you're working on for a local regional government or relevant to transport, you can join either the network of cities followers or the scaling group if you're from the private, let's say, side.
Great. I think also you can also share this link on the chat actually, and we can also share with our speakers, like with our attendees after this webinar. But this is very good to know. Stephanie, Steven, and Marina, do you have any reactions on this regarding the stakeholders you work with, or who are the different? What is the data that is more relevant in the project? So, Marina.
My presentation was in regards the data that is legally, that is part of the regulation, and that every single actor in the railway domain exchange with the authority and also between themselves following a specific regulation. So that's what I put in the link also in the chat, is the map of one of the data stores is publicly available. The available is also the Sparkle endpoint, and it's open to every actor to deploy new applications using that data.
Mm-hmm.
Because the railway infrastructure is considered one of the high value data sets for building applications also over this. It's demonstrated that we create a lot of value by reusing. There is, of course, other data areas that are much confidential or that has other tag, and this is a model in the ontology part of it. We are expanding the ontology with also a collaboration with a system pillar from Europe's Rail. Yeah, that's, I don't know if it helps to
Yes,
answer.
yes. Actually, there was a lot of interest also on the ERA knowledge graph, on how does it look, if
Mm-hmm.
actually can be reused in other fields, or
Yeah,
what is the tool that was used on it. So I understand by the interactions that it can be reused in other fields, so
yeah,
it's fully
it can be
accessible.
very. Yes, I'm gonna put. I put also the map, but I'm gonna put also the ontology and the Sparkle endpoint.
Great, that's wonderful. Then
And there are many questions about the difference between federated. I don't know if Dimitrios or someone wants to address. What I know about federated is that a bit more at a logistic level, not specifically only rail, but I remember that we also exchange data with, because they had an ontology also, so we were able to generate federated queries with logistic data asset. Yeah, perhaps other speaker can answer.
No,
if
indeed, that
anybody would
as
like to react,
yeah, as I
yes.
responded there, that indeed federated is actually we have our colleagues from the logistics unit that they are actually more experts on that, and this is our aim, that we are using this kind of input from these projects for all these initiatives that I mentioned before. And we have, of course, we are consulted with DTLF, the expert group on the logistics forum, digital transport logistics forum, for how to implement actually EMDS, taking this into account.
Mm-hmm.
The logistics part is very important, of course.
Great. I also we also had another question, but it was more on data maintenance and data quality, because of course, with all the collection of data into this data space, there are many stakeholders involved. It's true that you could have like a more coordination role, trying to stakeholders to speak to each other. but how can you actually ensure that this maintenance and these continuous updates are done? Is it something that is completely on the side of the stakeholders and data providers, or are you actually trying to help them with guidelines, recommendations? What is your goal? What is your take?
This is indeed the aim from the EMDS side to have recommendations and building blocks relevant to data
Mm-hmm.
quality. We have to be clear that the EMDS is not going to be a centralized data repository, meaning that the data will
Mm-hmm.
not be stored on EMDS. The idea is that the data stay with the data holders, but we need to help to how to make this data discoverable, shareable, and so on. So data quality is fundamental. It will still rely on how the data holders are managing this, but indeed we want to provide recommendations on that. I don't know if Stephen, based on your experience, you want to say anything about the data quality.
Yes, well, my experience is that data quality is really depending on the use case. So,
Mm.
for example, if I want statistics, then it's important that I have the data continuity. When I want real-time control policies on the data, then it's essential that that's a low latency. So that's really a difficult one. And so in that way, I think the current data space concept is first that we make it interoperable on the semantics level, so the standards, then on the interface, and then on the quality level, then I think we need to have a kind of a peer-to-peer contract, and that's also what's possible in a data space. So that I see I have data, but I cannot guarantee it. Then it's up to the user to decide if he want to use it, yes or no. And that's a kind of a part of the contractual peer-to-peer within a data space, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to coordinate it in a central place, but it's essential to have a community working, an ecosystem, so that people are understanding the different aspects of it to make it happen.
Yeah, indeed, great. I mean, I think it's very important to bear in mind, as you were saying, that it's not supposed to be a common repository, like a common portal where you publish everything, but you give access to different stakeholders. I think this is a very important take, actually, from this conversation. But how do you then ensure interoperability between different sectors? If Dimitris, would you like to take that one?
Yes, because I saw also these questions about the
Hmm.
other sectors. It's as I
Yeah,
mentioned,
indeed.
we already have outlined relevant data spaces to the mobility data space. But of course, if more data spaces are created and we see the links, we will include them in this exercise. We have different DGs of the Commission, the directors general, that they are responsible for each one of them. So we have DGN for the energy data space, DGN for the Green Deal data space and the smart cities. DigiGrow is working on the tourism. We are all working closely together and we are aligned. There is also a group with all of us responsible for its data space. The main idea of the Commission is to create one common European data space that will help into the interoperability, discoverability of all data in Europe. Imagine like a single market for data. We have not launched a specific kind of action with a use case, but we would like to do that in the coming future of a specific example how the different data spaces will be showcasing, let's say, the interoperability aspects between them. But this is really on our radar, and we are working on that and exchanging a lot of information on how to implement each other's connections.
Indeed. I have to, like from my side, I have to say that we work a lot, or we're very much ambassadors of open data. And actually, I think it's very good initiative that we're moving to on this direction to create this data space to ensure interoperability and data sharing across different stakeholders. But actually, Danielle, in this one of the people who are here attending this webinar, he asked actually if this data, all this data is going to be made available. I mean, not between the different stakeholders, different data providers, but actually to a wider audience. Is it something you are also exploring, or for the time being, is going to be more restricted data?
No, the idea is that we need to provide transparency, but we need to take into account that there will be data that they cannot be just available for everyone. When we talk about aviation, when we talk about confidential data, sensitive data, of course, they cannot be available, especially for free for everyone. There will be also commercial data, but the important is how to help into to provide transparency, who are the data holders and what are the access conditions. I think for me that's the most important aspect. Open data are very important, but let's be honest, open data from their nature, they are accessible to everyone. So we really want to look also into the data that maybe not all users are experts and they don't know how to discover. And imagine small and medium enterprises, they don't have the resources, or even research centers, they don't have the resources to go and discover every time from scratch all the data that they need for either their services or for their research purposes. So we want really to help in that aspect.
It's I fully agree. It's also good that we try to streamline and to not to try to reinvent the wheel on everything that has been done until now, because it doesn't mean that we're starting something from scratch, but we are just trying to put everything together under a common initiative, which is great. Okay, so I would like to thank you very much for all the questions, and especially for the speakers for taking the time now that we are, some of us, okay, not me, but some people are facing out for holidays. um, as I was mentioning before, your opinion is very important to us, so please take a few minutes to give us feedback about the session or how you would like the webinars in the future to take place. And I wish you, for those who are going on holidays, very good summer. We're slowing down the activities of the Data Europa Academy in terms of webinars, but we will restart again in September. So you will hear very soon from us. Thank you all very much. I hope it's sunny where you are. In Luxembourg is sunny, cloudy, I would say. And thank you, Stephanie, Steven, Marina, and Dimitrios. Have a very nice Friday.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very
Bye
much.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you.